The storm rolled across the cracked plain as heat lightning flared without sound. Mara staggered through the dust, with her last strength fading. Her people were not built for long exposure to the open sky of this world. The air burned her lungs, and the ground radiated pain through thin boots. When the outline of a shelter appeared, she thought it was a mirage, and then darkness took her. She woke on a cot inside a small metal room. The walls were rough and patched with plates from many sources. A soft hum came from a power cell under the floor. Water dripped somewhere with steady patience. Mara tried to rise and failed. Her body felt heavy and weak. She turned her head and saw a figure sitting near the door. He was tall with squared shoulders and skin marked by old scars. His eyes were alert yet calm. He noticed her movement at once and raised his hands to show peace. He spoke in a slow, clear tone, using the trade language with a thick accent. "You are safe. You collapsed outside. I brought you in." Mara swallowed and tasted minerals and medicine. She studied him with growing confusion. His build was dense and solid. His breathing was deep and even. The gravity of this planet crushed most visitors, but he sat at ease. Her mind searched for an answer and found none that felt right. No one like him should live alone here. "What are you?" she asked. The man hesitated and then answered without pride. "Human. My name is Eli." The word struck her harder than the storm. Humans were legends spoken with care. They were said to thrive in extremes and adapt to poison and pressure. They were also said to be unpredictable. Mara felt fear surge and then fade as her strength returned. She realized she was alive because of him. "Why help me?" she asked. Eli shrugged. "You were there. I had a shelter. That was reason enough." He offered a cup and helped her drink. The water was filtered and cool. He had added salts and a nutrient mix tuned for off-world bodies. The care surprised her. Raiders on this frontier would have taken advantage. Traders would have demanded payment. Eli asked nothing. As hours passed, Mara learned the shelter was a survey outpost abandoned after a failed mining claim. Eli had stayed to study weather patterns and seismic shifts. He repaired what he could and learned to live simply. He hunted with traps and grew fungus in trays, warmed by waste heat. The shelter smelled of metal and earth and quiet resolve. Mara explained she was a courier whose ship had been forced down by the storm. Her beacon failed, and she tried to walk toward a faint signal. She fainted before reaching it. Eli listened without interruption. When she finished, he nodded and checked a small console. "Your ship signal is weak, but present," he said. "Storm interference. We can try after nightfall." Night came with sudden cold. The shelter held firm. Outside the wind screamed and stones rattled against the walls. Inside Eli sealed vents and adjusted shields. He moved with practiced care. Mara watched and felt a strange comfort. When the wind eased, Eli stepped out to adjust an antenna. Mara followed to the door and saw the world anew. The sky cleared to reveal a sharp field of stars. The plain stretched empty and vast. She saw how small the shelter was and how exposed. She understood then why humans were feared and respected. To choose to live here required more than strength. Eli returned with frost on his sleeves. He smiled slightly. "Signal is clearer now." He boosted the beacon and sent a tight burst toward her ship. They waited. Minutes passed. Then a reply blinked on the screen. Mara laughed with relief and felt tears form. She bowed her head to Eli. "I owe you my life." Eli shook his head. "Just rest. We wait for extraction at dawn." They spoke through the night about small things. Eli told stories of rain on his home world and of cities built near water. Mara spoke of floating markets and songs sung to guide travelers. They found shared humor in the failures of machines and the stubbornness of nature. As dawn approached, lights appeared on the horizon. A rescue craft descended and settled near the shelter. The crew moved with urgency and respect. They paused when they saw Eli and whispered among themselves. Humans still carried a quiet reputation. Mara stood strong now. She turned to Eli and placed a token in his hand. It was a simple band marked with her courier seal. "For trust," she said. "If you ever need passage, show this." Eli accepted it with a nod. Safe travels. The craft lifted and the wind settled. Eli watched until the sky was empty again. He returned to his shelter and his work. The storm had passed and the plane waited. Somewhere far above a story would spread. A human shelter in the storm. A fainting courier who woke and realized the truth. On harsh worlds, kindness could be the strongest survival trait. Days later, the rescue craft returned with supplies promised by the Courier Guild. Crates were lowered with care, and a brief message thanked the human who had assisted one of their own. Eli stored what he could and shared the rest with passing crews who braved the route. Word traveled faster than storms. Mara recovered fully aboard her ship and insisted on sending a report. She described the shelter and the man and the choices he made without demand. Her superiors read with interest. The Frontier Council debated quietly. Human presence often changed balances. Yet this case showed restraint and service. Weeks passed. The weather shifted. Eli measured and recorded. He reinforced the roof and tuned the heater. He learned the rhythm of the land. One evening, a group of travelers arrived guided by rumor and a weak signal. They asked for shelter, and Eli gave it. He taught them how to seal suits and read the sky. They left with gratitude and respect. Mara returned once more before her route changed. She brought tools and filters suited to the shelter. She and Eli spoke as friends. She told him that humans were spoken of differently now in some circles. Less as a threat and more as a standard of endurance paired with mercy. Eli listened and returned to his work. He never sought credit. He believed survival was shared or it failed. When storms rose, he opened the door. When calm returned, he repaired what was broken. The shelter became a quiet node of hope on a hard map. Years later, a station was built nearby using data Eli gathered. Trade improved. Lives were saved. The legend remained simple. She fainted in his shelter and woke to learn he was human. The rest followed naturally. Between storms, Eli practiced maintenance drills. He timed himself sealing breaches and rerouting power. He learned which metals sang under stress and which failed without warning. He kept notes plain and precise. The land respected preparation. One night, seismic tremors shook the plain. The shelter rocked and alarms chimed. Eli secured the core and waited. A fissure opened nearby, releasing warm gas and dust. At dawn, he mapped the change and adjusted anchors. The shelter stood. A survey team arrived later and found the site stable. They asked why Eli stayed alone. He answered that quiet taught him more than crowds. They left instruments and a handshake. Mara followed the data from afar. She saw patterns align with Eli reports. Her guild rerouted paths to reduce risk. She spoke to crews and told them what to expect and where to find help. The shelter became a waypoint known for fairness. When another storm struck, a medical transport limped toward the plane. Eli guided them in with beacon and voice. He worked through the night, treating dehydration and shock with limited tools. The crew survived. They carried the story onward. Eli never claimed hero status. He accepted thanks and returned to routine. The land tested him, and he answered with patience. In time he planned to leave, but the shelter felt like a promise kept. On a clear morning, he stepped outside and watched clouds gather far away. He smiled and prepared. Somewhere Mara charted a new course and trusted the signal would hold. It did. The council eventually visited. They expected demands and found none. Eli asked only that routes remain open and that travelers learn the signs. The council agreed. They left a plaque without ceremony. Eli placed it inside where wind could not erode meaning. Seasons turned. Flora adapted around warm vents. Small creatures nested near the shelter. Eli observed without interference. Balance mattered. Mara sent a final message before transferring sectors. She thanked Eli again and said she taught new couriers to trust steady signals and steady people. Eli replied with a simple acknowledgement. On the anniversary of the storm, he reviewed logs. The first entry noted a courier collapsed at the door. The last noted clear skies and stable ground. He closed the book and brewed tea. When the next traveler arrived faint and frightened, the shelter door opened. The cycle continued. On harsh worlds, kindness remained practical and strong. Humanity showed itself, not through conquest, but through care. Eli adjusted the antenna and listened to the quiet. He thought of home rarely and without ache. Purpose lived here now. He maintained the shelter so others could pass. That was enough. A child once asked over the radio why a human would stay. Eli answered that some places ask for guardians. The child laughed and promised to visit. The shelter lights glowed as night fell. Stars sharpened. Wind softened. Eli logged conditions and rested. Far away, Mara finished her run and told the tale one last time. It never grew grand. It stayed true. A fainting courier. A shelter. A human who chose to help. The plane endured. The signal endured. So did the lesson. Travelers learned to prepare and to share. Routes grew safer. Fear eased. Respect replaced rumor. The shelter remained small and strong. Eli watched another sunrise and tightened a bolt. He smiled at the work. Survival was not loud. It was steady. On the map, a single point pulsed.